So if you were just to look at these two TVs, which one would you say is the OLED and which one would you say is the Bravia 9? I think at a glance, after calibration to my standards, it would be very difficult to spot a difference between these two, particularly in a darkroom environment. Now, after scrutinizing it and squinting for a little bit, you could notice a difference pretty quickly if you know what to look for. Little things like small, tiny highlights being very bright. Little things like, again, a little bit of blooming that you can see on certain objects. Those things will become more and more apparent. If you are good at kind of discerning this, you'll see that the left is the Samsung S95D, the right is the Sony Bravia 9. Now, the Sony Bravia 9 is doing an impressive job when you lower the brightness, but the problem is you cannot under any circumstance use the full screen's brightness. And I just want to go ahead and pause right here. I'm using the Sony 4K contrast demo of 2015 for anyone out there that would like to replicate this. And it is on, I'm going to mess up his name. I'm Quang Nguyen. I don't know how to say that. Sorry if I butchered your name. And this is a perfect demo for any kind of LED-based television that is trying to make the claim that it gets closer to OLED, because Sony's contrast demo is really the best there is. If you look, though, I want to also draw attention to one of the other things that, like, we hear a lot from, like, a lot of the purists on the Sony side of things, that Sony just has the best colors, and Samsung's very cartoonish color just doesn't look right, particularly grass. Grass is, like, just incorrect, inaccurate. Look at my grass there and look at the grass on the Sony, and you'll see that the Sony has the worst grass by comparison. I will also see you and raise you by telling you I put a substantial amount of effort and time into getting the Sony as close to what I think its best chance is at winning and fighting in this comparison to its best ability. It is not beating the Samsung S95D in any accuracy comparison you will hold up when you talk about grass. So for those who are so used to saying, like, Samsung has acid grass or, you know, neon grass, you can stop doing that now, because that is not the case. What I will also do in real time is show you and kind of extend an olive branch. I understand if you are using something like native, the grass does get a lot more green. As you can clearly see when I switch from my native setting, which I have locked in on standard, which is, again, native being the color space, and custom color space being where you go in and color correct everything. Yeah, if you're just using the default native, yeah, it's gonna look a little green, and incorrectly green at times. But if you do it correctly and color calibrate, the green is better than what Sony is offering. And you see that here. And I just wanted to point that part out because I don't think people are being honest about that. We will get to that a little bit more in depth, but right now, let's just continue, okay? For starters, we're also going to show you that, again, with low bitrate content, YouTube type content, the S95D in no way, shape, and or form loses to the Sony at all. In fact, it remains to be very clear. And on the Sony, I had to do some really wonky stuff with the reality creation to ramp up the reality creation to like 50 because it was too blurry. I don't know why a Soul Alive isn't talking about how blurry the Sony Bravia 9 is, but it's very blurry. It also has a major blooming problem, okay, which I will go ahead and show you now. For anyone out there wondering, my peak brightness is maxed out, and I have my brightness on 17. And just to show you again, the SDR peak luminance here is on high. Don't know if you can see that. We also have auto local dimming on high. So auto local dimming high, SDR peak luminance on high, and my brightness is at 17, okay? The reason my brightness is at 17 is because I am not joking when I tell you there's a ton of blooming. So we'll go ahead and use the maximum brightness, and there you go. A ton of frickin' damn blooming. And this is something that I don't think a lot of people are going to be forthcoming about, as we have not seen a single YouTuber be forthcoming about this. Now again, I don't know what YouTube's going to show you, so I'll go ahead and open up my ISO or my camera sensitivity to light just a little bit more so you can see all of the damn blooming. Again, I don't know how readily available you'll see this. I have my ISO set to 3200. I don't like to go above 6400. just for the sake of not having the video be too grainy. So I think at this point you can see all the blooming. And the blooming that is showing up on camera, at least as I look at the viewfinder, is exactly what I see on my end here. There's a ton of freaking blooming. And to sit here and say that there's not a ton of blooming on a Sony demo is. This exact scene, I kid you not, max brightness at 1 minute, 17 seconds, okay? And you'll see the blooming. It will be very, very apparent. You'll see around each individual light, there is significant, not like understated, no, it is significantly noticeable blooming. Now, I have to say this because we are talking about mini LED. I understand that there's no such thing as a perfect TV, okay? But I also, for the price point, understand that TCL is the next best option. I'm sorry, but I don't agree with those who say that Hisense is. They have some serious motion issues this year, and they have a posterization problem, which makes everything look like a piece of paper got wet with ink. You know, it looks like it makes everything look like wet ink on paper. So I'm not with what Hisense is doing this year with the U8N. If you are, congratulations. But for all intents and purposes, what we have here with the Bravia 9 is pretty ridiculous, considering TCL is able to get way better results for a lot less money. We're talking on sale, you can get a TCL 65-inch, QM851G for $999. And on sale, you can get this Bravia 9 for $2,999, down from the $3,299. There's a price issue here, because when we look at the price to performance, it's very clear that there's something going on. I mean, as you can clearly see, I'll play the demo so you can see with your own eyes in real time, there is a difference, and it's not a good difference, right? We'll pause right here. 1 minute, 28 seconds, okay? You can clearly see with tangible timestamps that you can verify yourself that this is blooming. And I know people might try to mitigate that to not being an issue, but if you are in a pitch black room, as you see, my room isn't even pitch black and I can see that blooming. When all the light sources go off, that's going to be very, very annoying, as it was for me when I was watching this, trying to utilize the high peak luminance, okay, that Sony does offer this year. It's wasted. It's totally useless. It's a feature to get you to buy. And I also want to throw out something for the purists out there who maybe are trying to review this and trying to pretend like it's an amazing TV just because it's bright. There is no possible way to use Sony's maximum brightness in SDR and adhere to reference standards. I'll say that again. There is no possible way to adhere to a reference standard, a current reference standard, which right now the peak luminance max is like anywhere from 100 nits to like 160 nits for calibration. There is no possible way to use the immense amount, the thousands of nits that this TV does output. There's no way to do that adhering to the reference standard. So for all intents and purposes, if you want to see what the TV can do as far as brightness anyway, their brightness claims, you're venturing in inaccurate territory. Which is where I kind of have my next question. Why is Sony going down the I want to be a purist TV, but then also offer not purist things like high peak brightness? It's kind of redundant. It's kind of like you're shooting yourself in the foot almost, because yes, I feel like you should have the best of both worlds. You should have your purist mode, which would be the professional mode that's in the TV, or your IMAX enhanced mode, which is in the TV. And even a cinema mode, which is in the TV. They go a little crazy with trying to be reference accurate, if you can notice. But the problem that I have is when you try to do something that's not reference accurate, like use maximum brightness with more impressive color, the results are almost abysmal instantly. And I mean instantly. And that has been the bane of my existence with this TV. Now, I also want to point out some of the finer things that you're going to miss out going from mini LED to something like QD OLED to a QD Mini LED. Got a little tongue tied there, okay? So the QD OLED to the right, as you can clearly see, is just doing a better job. I don't have it fully framed properly. We'll go ahead and fix that, okay? You get the idea. The QD Mini LED is going to have a better control over all the various lights. Now, because Samsung has done something very stupid this year, in my opinion, with the matte finish screen. You can see it disperse the reflection all across the screen from a window that I have in the background. That's going to happen. And so, while I don't think that there's a perfect TV, I feel like there are things that are just common sense things that they could be doing that they are not doing, right? And that kind of is, don't put a matte finish screen on a premium product because you get really awkward glare like that. You know, don't target high peak brightness and then have a ton of blooming. Now, to be fair, in this instance, it's not as bad as you see. It's muted a little bit better, which I can respect. I like. Fantastic. Okay, good. But as we're looking at this, you can see that you're missing all of the tiny little lights. And that's really the name of the game when we talk about what we are and are not getting. Tiny little lights. And yes, by the way, the YouTube menu is blooming as well, particularly the search bar and all that. I'm going to pause right here, and I'll trace it with my finger and show you exactly where it's at. Actually, I said I'd pause, and I didn't, so I have to go back. We'll go back. Now, some of the highlights may be exaggerated when you go down into like the tiles and things like that. Like, pause. There we go. Like the tiles, that's going to be overblown because my ISO is set to 3200. This is just to show you the light trail a little bit better. That's not to say that it is not as prevalent as I'm saying that it is, because it definitely is there. And I will trace where it is so that you can see it. Because maybe even at 3200 you can't, okay? So I see blooming in this little city area here. A lot of blooming around all the light sources, really. And it's like rectangular. So it cuts off here and goes over there. Okay, that's one section of blooming. And then it picks right back up. It starts here, gets really intense under the Eiffel Tower. And then this light source is really intensely blooming as well. Now, when we go up the shaft, there's nothing really as far as blooming there. But once we get to this tiny, narrow light beam, it does kind of bloom pretty substantially there as well. And that's what we can see. Also, if you're searching around on YouTube, if you look at the search bar, it's going to bloom above the search bar. Not around the icons, but above the search bar definitely has some pretty substantial bloom. This is not something that you likely saw in any of those videos telling you that this is the Value Electronics Mini LED King of 2024, and you probably saw a bunch of beautiful footage, which, by the way, I do have a lot of beautiful footage of this TV, but I want to be honest too. And I think this video is the right way to open it up because it's sold on its brightness and its black levels. So I think we should investigate that first and then move on to some of the other things, because it does do right things. Don't hear this and think it's just not doing anything right. It does some great things, but there are a lot of things wrong too, and we're going to point both out. So it would be a very long video if I did both in one video, so we are going to have to break it up across different videos, so make sure you stay and watch for that. But essentially, I want to point out a couple different things. One, the clock tower is just blooming, okay? I'll trace where it is in case the camera is over-exaggerating, or I can just lower my ISO. I don't know if that will change things dramatically. Probably will. I think right about there you might be able to see it, but I'm not seeing it on camera now. I really am not, so I'm gonna have to go to 3200 because that's where I can see it. Okay, what I'm noticing is there's blooming right here, very faint blooming in here. The most intense blooming though that I notice where it gets really hazy is right around here. Now the reason that happens is because that clock needs to stay bright, but then in the shadowy areas, it needs to remain dark, and the two are conflicting with one another because local dimming isn't pixel level illumination. So it has to pick. You can either be bright or dark, but you cannot be both. And when you have to be both bright and dark because of the type of contrast, that's where you run into the problem on the Sony Bravia 9. And the Bravia 9 is, again, if you pay close attention, anytime you have to be both bright and dark at the same time, you run into blooming around here, like up here at the crown, blooming around there, because this TV cannot do bright and dark at the same exact time. Now, there is a way to mitigate the blooming. I will keep my ISO at 3200, and I will show you what that's like. Before I do that, I do want to show you something that I forgot to tell you. So the TV has a quirk about it, or an issue that, again, you likely didn't hear from anyone else. Anytime you open up the menus, there will be substantial clouding because the local dimming immediately disables the moment you pull up a menu. And I'll show you what that means. So I'll just take my remote and I'll hit the settings button, and then I'll open up the picture settings and look at all that clouding that just got on the screen. Now, local dimming is enabled, but this is a defect, or not even a defect so much as just a software issue that maybe they need to patch. So if Sony is watching, maybe pass this along to them or tell somebody in R&D to fix this, because when I go back, it goes away. And when I open the menu back up, it's only when you go into the settings that it does that. That is the biggest oversight. So if you are ever watching a content piece that's dark like this, and you need to adjust something in your settings, you are going to be met with some ugly nonsense like this. Not very good for a $3,000 TV. Now what we're gonna do is lower our brightness from max all the way back down to 17 where I had it, because unfortunately the brightness is truly just not usable. We're gonna then go into our peak luminance where you see that is high, and then we have local dimming set to high, okay? Now, we're gonna go ahead and back out of this, and we're gonna try that picture menu thing again. And again, notice how even with those parameters set, local dimming on high, peak luminance on high, and then you lower down to even 17, you will still see substantial hazing and clouding because your local dimming disables every single time you open a menu. I cannot stress how big of a massive oversight and just incompetent blunder this was. This is a huge deal on a TV that needs to maintain its black level. So yeah, definitely pass that information on to Sony because they need to fix that. The other thing that I would like to point out at this time is that, again, the image is better, but it still does have blooming in all the areas I pointed out. And then again, similarly, so does the search bar. And again, my ISO is at 3200, so you can see what I'm talking about. I am not over exaggerating how bad it is by using a higher ISO. I'm using an ISO that I truly believe is reflecting what I'm seeing on my end. And unfortunately, I had to raise it that high because for whatever reason, it's just not showing the right way on camera, which is very weird. It could be the new lens that I have on or whatever, because some lenses add contrast or some other things depending on what you're doing. Again, you have to experiment with new gear when you get it, but whatever. You guys get what I'm saying. The idea is still the same though, in that there is a problem, and that problem is quite simply this. The black levels aren't as buttoned up as they need to be on a Sony television. I mean, especially when it costs $3,000, right? All right, other thing I noticed, or have noticed, when you go to like the Sony logo at the end, there's like this this nonsense that happens where you see the blooming even around the Sony logo at the end. So I'll just bring it to where it's about to end, okay? And you'll see what I mean, okay? Pause right there. The blooming off of that is kind of ridiculous. Now, you do have to I'll turn it down a bit. You do have to look a bit to see it. I think the blooming is right about there at 2500 on my camera sensitivity to light, or ISO. And that's what I'm really seeing. But the problem is you shouldn't be seeing that. And I don't think people are realizing that. When you're taking a step down from the Quantum.OLED that they had last year, and you're paying the exact same amount of money, you're getting downgraded on your remote, you're getting downgraded on not having the Bravia cam included. It's extremely heavy and will have you paying people to put this thing up on a wall if you want to wall mount it, or have family, breaking their back with you. So sweat equity is already what you're paying. You're forced to sign into your personal Google account. And now here we are with blooming. I mean, and I personally ran into the acoustic speaker failure, which, by the way, the speakers do not sound good. They are very, very tinny. So, I mean, TCL had way clearer audio by far. Their bass was tinny, but their audio was clear. Sony's audio is barely clear. Like, it's nowhere close to what TCL did for audio at all. We can just throw that out there. Again, price to price, remembering what it was like when I had the TCL here, the TCL just hit way harder. Like, it from an audio perspective and a black level perspective, as far as local dimming, it just did. And I don't know that this is being represented fairly or as accurately as it should be.